Welcome friends, welcome back to Sunday morning in the old cookbook show. Today we're going to do a recipe out of this cookbook. This is the Virginia Housewife or Methodical Cook. First published in Philadelphia in 1825 or 1828? 1828. This copy was published in 1856 or printed in 1856. Generally, this cookbook is considered sort of a pivotal work in American cookbooks, and it is a fairly comprehensive cookbook. It has lots of recipes that I would say are informed by the American experience, using ingredients found here in North America that you wouldn't have found in the old world or in Europe. A lot of the recipes I recognize from earlier works from England and Scotland. The recipes are copied title, word for word, spelling mistake for spelling mistake. Exact copies, which isn't uncommon. I'm not taking anything away from this book. That was a common practice. There is absolutely no copyright on recipes, and they were lifted and shared and republished and republished and republished. And that's happening in this book. The recipe that I want to use out of this book today, I want to do it because it completely confuses me. It's called the Tavern Biscuit. It's on a page with a drop biscuit. When I see something called a biscuit in an American cookbook, I think of the Southern biscuit, the fluffy, tall Southern biscuit, usually made with buttermilk or, so on and so on. But this recipe reads like a cookie, like an English biscuit, a cookie, not an American biscuit, which the English would call a scone or a scone. So I want to make this and see how it turns out. Everything about the recipe says cookie. Everything about the method says cookie. But when I looked online, I see this recipe crop up, and there's one website that has pictures of the recipe, and they look like a fluffy American biscuit. So we're going to find out. In this bowl, I have flour, just regular old flour, doesn't specify anything about the flour. To that, I'm going to add sugar, and I'm going to grate in some nutmeg. It doesn't say how much nutmeg, it just says some. And I know that in this time period, people loved their nutmeg. So I'm going to put in about half of a nutmeg, and we'll see how that works out. Next, it asks for mace, powdered mace, ground mace. So I've got some ground mace here. I'm not a huge fan of mace. I like mace. I like mace in small doses. There's some flavor component in the mace that I just don't like. Now, mace, nutmeg, same plant, same seed, a lot of the same flavors, except one has flavors that are a little bit different. Now, nutmeg is a drupe. Other drupes that you may know are peaches, plums, cherries are drupes. And so there's a fruit, and inside the fruit is this seed. And this seed has sort of a light yellowy covering, and when it's fresh, it's red. And you pull off that red covering, and then you grind it up. That is mace. And inside that covering is another shell, and I don't know if you can hear it. Wait, let me get one. So inside is that darker shell, and inside that shell is the actual nutmeg. So if I just put this on the counter and crush it, break it open, inside is the nutmeg. And so inside the shell is the nutmeg. So you've got a fruit, seeds inside the fruit, the arrow around the seed is the mace, then you've got the dark seed, and inside that shell is the nutmeg. Probably more than you wanted to know about nutmeg and mace. So I've got that in the bowl. Give that a bit of a stir just to bring it together. Don't really have to worry about it too much, because next I'm going to add in the butter. And I'm just going to use my fingers to rub the butter into the flour. I mean, it's 2020. Feel free to do this in your food processor or stand mixer, but I would suggest at least once in your lifetime, do this by hand. Rub the flour into the butter. It gives you a real good feel of what your food is supposed to be like. I think it makes you a better baker, makes you a better cook if you really know what each stage is. And there's also something really relaxing about doing this. Just rubbing the butter into the flour and through your fingers. So you want it to look like sand, which I've pretty much got it to the point where it looks like wet sand. This is very much a method for making pie crust or shortbread for that matter. So next it asks for a glass of brandy. And so I've got an American brandy here that would have been seen in this time period for sure. Okay, get rid of that bottle. And brandy. In it goes. So we mix this in, and next we wet it with milk. And it doesn't say how much milk, probably just enough milk to get it to come together. And it's almost coming together with that amount of brandy, so I don't think it's going to take too much milk. My hands are covered in dough. This is one of those things, you know, wash your hands 40 times while you're making stuff. Okay, so I'm going to wash my hands, I'll get the milk, and we'll come back. Oh, this isn't going to need much milk, which is good because there's not much milk left in the bag. I'm going to try that much, which might be too much. Let's see. Now the next instruction is to knead it. So if I was making a biscuit like a southern biscuit today, you would not be kneading the dough. So I'm supposed to knead it until it comes together and then roll it thin. Now it was too sticky, so I added a little bit of flour. And put a little bit of flour on the bench. And we're going to roll this out thin. Okay, which size? I'm gonna say that size. I don't know which size. To me, I'm still in the dark. It smells fantastic, and it feels like a really amazing pie dough. I think this would make a fantastic pie dough, but we're gonna see when we bake them what happens. And just down here at the end, I probably will use the smaller cutter just to get as many as possible out. Now, the only baking instruction is bake quickly. So I take that to be a hot oven. I'm just going to put these on a baking sheet, stick them in the oven, and watch them closely and see what happens. And last one.
Hey, Glen, what are you looking at?
Hey, Jules.
Hey, friends.
It's a meatloaf. But it asked to be cooked covered, and it looked a little anemic. So I took the cover off and stuck it back in the oven.
Now I want to peek too.
Which means we get to start with cookies.
Yay! Pre-supper cookies.
Tavern Biscuits. So
the traditional term of biscuit.
I think so. So this is an American cookbook, a Virginia cookbook from 1828, originally published. There are no American biscuit recipes in the book. What we would look at a recipe and say that's an American biscuit. There's this called a Tavern Biscuit, and I'm expecting something like a shortbread cookie.
It's savory. It's not as melty in your mouth like a shortbread cookie.
Well, it asked you to knead it, which I guess makes it a sugar cookie at some point. Butter, flour, sugar, nutmeg, mace, brandy,
Okay, I
milk.
think definitely if I didn't know that I was going to be eating,
Yep,
I would eat, a half a dozen more though.
they are very good. I really like this. This is a great
Okay,
biscuit.
I'm not going to have one. I'm going to be good.
A great cookie. The glass of brandy that I put in, you probably didn't need to put in.
You didn't need a glass of brandy?
Well, you didn't need a glass. You didn't need as much milk. I put in too much milk.
Okay.
Easy enough. Put in a little bit more flour and knead it. I find it very interesting, though, that an American cookbook, a Virginia cookbook, has no biscuit recipes.
Because we think of biscuits, Virginia biscuits.
All of the biscuit recipes in this book are UK cookies, or what we.
I know, get language, right? It's so
What Americans
subtle. Yes.
call cookies, what Canadians call cookies, although we also call it a biscuit because it says biscuit on every package. It gets very confusing. What isn't confusing is that these are really good. So give them a try.
There you go.
Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon. This is my after the credit shot, because I know that people are going to write down in the comments. I see it all the time. You're going to say, there doesn't need to be a Southern biscuit recipe in a Southern cookbook in 1858 because everybody knew how to make them. That it's a simple recipe, it didn't need to be repeated. Yet all of these cookbooks from these time periods are filled with super simple recipes. Recipes that today we would even think are simple. So that doesn't quite hold water. That it didn't need to be written down because everybody knew how to do it.
So thanks for sticking around and listening to Glen's messaging.
It has to be said, though. Okay, onward.